Working Cows Podcast, episode 243.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, powered by the Global Ag Network, and very excited today to be joined by Amanda Radke. Amanda is an advocate, you might say. She's traveled extensively speaking and training people how to advocate for ag. Also, she has done a fair amount of her own advocacy as well, not just training people, but been doing that work herself. She's also an author of many children's books, Levi's Lost Calf and Can Do Cow Kids, and Home Runs for Peanuts, and The Soil Quilt, which was done in partnership with the Soil Health Coalition, South Dakota Soil Health Coalition. Speaking of the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition, South Dakota Farm Bureau and the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition are partnering together to put on a sustainable ag or soil health tour. We'll be touring a place northwest of Mobridge, South Dakota. So if you happen to live in the neighborhood of Mobridge, South Dakota, and you're interested, or if you don't, if you want to just come down, it's a free event, but we would ask you to register. So registration will be up today at the show notes page today, workingcows.net/243. So if you want to go there and click on that link and get registered, let us know you're coming. So we got enough seats and enough porta potties and enough food and all those things. We'd be happy to have you join us on the Mazzaro Ranch, place that's been integrating livestock onto crop ground, doing cover crops, grazing, lots of the stuff we love to talk about here on the Working Cows Podcast. Lots of stuff that's featured in Amanda's book, The Soil Quilt. Head over to the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/243. Also there, you will find a link to Amanda's newest book, which releases today, as a matter of fact, and that book is Faith, Family, and Freedom. And so we're going to talk to Amanda about her books. We're going to talk to her about advocacy work. We're going to talk to her about just a lot of the different things that she's been doing, the questions she's been answering, and how she has been combating those misconceptions that we all have heard a lot about in the social media realm and other places. So with all that said, I'd like to welcome Amanda to the show. Amanda, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you've been doing quite a bit of work in the advocacy realm. I don't know if advocacy is too much of a mouthful, but I've heard it said. And I guess one of the ways that you've been doing that is through ag literacy and writing some children's books. I think the one that came on my radar most recently was the Soil Quilt book, which was the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition. I think it was a partnership with them, but it was their book of the year, and then South Dakota Farm Bureau also selected it as their book of the year. So could you tell me a little bit about some of the books that you've written and some of the work that you've been doing in that realm?
Sure. So I'm a South Dakota rancher and a mom of four. And about a decade ago, I started noticing that cartoons, movies, books, everything that was being presented to kids as it related to agriculture was very cartoonish, meaning, there was the Disney effect. The animals walked and talked and had the full range of emotions, and the farmers and ranchers were the side characters or the bad guys. And so I really wanted to flip the narrative on that. And so that's what prompted me to start writing children's books. I travel across the country speaking at agricultural conferences anyway. And so a lot of times when I'm on the road, I try to connect with a local school in the area and get in to read these books to kids. And so I have 6 titles out now, including the Soil Quilt, and they're all aimed at showing an accurate picture of who we are in agriculture and what we do and how food gets to the dinner table.
And is the Soil Quilt your most recent one that's released?
No, actually, we just released a new one with Zoetis that came out here last week called C is for Care. So my titles would include Levi's Lost Calf, Can Do Cow Kids, Home Run for Peanuts. So writing about peanut farming was a whole new ballgame for this cowgirl. The Soil Quilt, Beef Strong, and then C is for Care. And we'll have a seventh one come out on Memorial Day of this year titled Faith, Family, and Freedom.
Okay. And did the peanut one require a trip to Georgia to see peanut farming in action?
We did it. It was kind of right in the middle of COVID. So a lot of it was virtual. But so how that came to be is the Georgia Beef Board had reached out to us to do a book. They had seen Levi's Lost Calf and really liked it. And so they wanted a story about ranch life. And so we did a book that was Can Do Cow Kids, which highlighted the different careers in the beef industry that kids could get involved in, because not everyone's going to grow up to be a cowboy or a cowgirl, but they could be a veterinarian or a nutritionist or all the different roles that are played to get beef to the dinner table. And so Can Do Cow Kids was the result of that effort. And then the Georgia peanut farmers heard about it and they're like, hey, we want a book too. And so it was a real big learning experience for me because I'd never been on a peanut farm before. I had no idea how the plant grew. And it's kind of a reminder to all of us that we assume everybody understands what we do in our sector of agriculture, especially, we think all of our neighbors and friends in town should understand what we're doing. But I, in detail, couldn't explain how peanuts were grown or, strawberries on a big scale or tulips or whatever it might be in other segments of the industry. And so it reminds us all kind of to step back and say, okay, the general public is brand new to a lot of these concepts. So how can we explain it in a way that they understand?
Yeah. And I always say, one of the best parts for me about being involved with South Dakota Farm Bureau has been the fact that I'm row crop illiterate. I grew up in Western South Dakota. I've never lived anywhere where there was row crops farmed, as a major source of income or share of the economy. And so being a part of South Dakota Farm Bureau, I've gotten to, get to know them and get to know the seasons of their work and what's busy time, what's slow time, what's going on the farms. And that's just been an eye-opening experience for me. And I'm only half a state away from a place where it is the dominant form of agriculture, and I still don't know that much about it. So it's it's not hard to be siloed. Pun intended,
yeah,
maybe.
Right. Well, we're kindred spirits in that way, because I truly consider myself a rancher and not a farmer. It about kills me to be in a tractor seat for too long. So we don't grow corn and soybeans, but we do raise forage crops, so oats and Sudan grass and things like that. So yes, I do have to kind of pay attention to what the neighbors across the road are doing, and I'm like, it's not what I'm doing at all, but you kind of gain a different appreciation for different production methods.
And you guys are in Mitchell, right? Or near Mitchell?
Yeah. Yep.
What
North
direction?
Of Mitchell.
North of Mitchell.
Yep. Right along the James River there.
Okay. Gotcha. And has the advocacy work been going on before the book writing? Were you doing that work before the book writing?
Yeah, probably my whole life. So my grandma was very involved with the South Dakota Cattlemen's Auxiliary, and they did consumer events, all throughout the state. And so she kind of took me along for the ride when I was very young. I got involved with the Beef Ambassador program. So at 10 years old, I was a junior beef ambassador out, handing out beef sticks to people. And then I became a senior beef ambassador and ended up winning the national competition. At that time, it was a checkoff funded program through the American National Cattlewomen. And so I spent the year traveling the country at places like the Boston Marathon or the World Egg Expo in California, and kind of everywhere in between, talking to people. And that really set me up for what I would do as a career. I moved to Washington, D.C. for a summer, my first summer out of high school. And, I was just a meat and potatoes farm girl from South Dakota. And I get to my dorm room at George Washington University. And my roommate that was assigned to live with me for the summer was a vegan activist from New Jersey. And it was a long summer, I'm not going to lie, but I learned a whole heck of a lot about what urban consumers on the coast think about those of us in rural America. And it really prompted me to start thinking, how can I be a voice for my loved ones back at home, my parents, my grandparents, all of my friends who simply don't have that platform. And so that's kind of really what sparked it for me. And I will say, people always ask, how did that summer end up? But my roommate was eating beef by the end of the summer. So that was pretty exciting win for me.
Yeah. So that's a great segue. What would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions? And we don't have to limit to a specific number, but what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions that the more urban people have about the rural environment and lifestyle and what it takes to get food produced?
Yeah. So there's so many misconceptions that are out there. And one of the things that I always talk about when I'm doing speaking engagements is that of all the things that we think we have that are different from our consumers and the people that we aim to serve, we actually have a lot of shared values. So at the end of the day, you and I in South Dakota care just as much about the things that someone in New York City or Los Angeles would care about when they walk into the grocery store. They want their food to taste good. They want it to fit in their budget and be affordable. They want it to be safe. They want to know that the animals were taken care of and that the environment wasn't harmed in the process of raising those animals or those, those products. And so I really focus on those 5 key values because usually those misconceptions fall in one of those value, areas. And so if I can find what you care about, then I can bridge that gap and start talking about, well, this is actually the truth from rural America. So the biggest one right now, of course, is the greenhouse gas emissions with the cow farts. And it's like, I think I've had to explain that one a million times over, until you're blue in the face. The truth is on our side, of course, but it is one that really has seemed to take off and really stick.
Are there any helpful ways of talking about that or responding to that you've found over the years?
Yeah, I have a funny story. I was at a conference in Michigan speaking to a group of dairy farmers, and it was a kids' social media training. And I had the kids practice their elevator speech, which is who you are and where you come from and what you do to produce, in this case, dairy for people to enjoy. And then I had them practice, and I said, I'm going to play the part of the consumer, and I'm going to ask you some tough questions about the dairy industry. And so this 13-year-old kid gets up and says, I'm a 5th generation dairy farmer and my family raises cheese, yogurt, and ice cream for your family to enjoy. And I said, wait just a minute. You mean you have cows that are farting methane into the environment and they're destroying the ozone layer with their gas? And he looked at me and he got real serious and he put a hand on his hip and he said, you know what, Amanda, girls fart too. And I was just like mortified, like, oh my gosh. But then what I told him that day is I said, congratulations, you stumped the speaker, because I had no comeback. But if I was actually a consumer in the grocery store, did I go buy that jug of milk that day, or did I go buy the almond milk because you were such a jerk? And so often we get super defensive, or we laugh and say, look at these dumb city slickers. They don't know anything. So what I tell people is a really easy soundbite is, I hear you care about the environment and I do too. And, here's what my family does to take care of our natural resources. And oh, by the way, the U.S. beef industry contributes 3.4% of total greenhouse gas emissions. And, when we compare it to the lion's share of contributors like transportation or electricity, it is a drop in the bucket. And according to Frank Mitloner of UC Davis, an air quality specialist, he says if every American were to go meatless on Mondays, we would reduce our carbon footprint by 0.26%. And so it's really a negligible thing. But yeah, I think we can't repeat those truths enough because the lie is just running rampant.
Right. And I think that piece that you mentioned there about kind of that conflict or where, they think we're dumb farmers wearing overalls and we think they're dumb city slickers that think chocolate milk comes from brown cows. That's not a healthy relationship. Have you encountered that at all? And do you have things to say about how we can make that a more profitable relationship and how we can handle that relationship better?
Well, I think it's important to know that a lot of these folks are researching heavily their food and they're trying to make educated, well-informed decisions on their purchases that they feed their family. People want to feel good about what they're spending their money on. And so again, if we can go back to those shared values instead of focusing on all the differences we think we have, we can make strides in a positive direction. And I found I have to let go of the preconceived notions I have about folks who live outside of agriculture and hope that, in every conversation I have, I aim to be kind and to be factual and to try to connect on an emotional level, because people want to feel, like I said, they want to feel good. They are driven by emotions, whether that's a good or bad thing or not. But they want a story behind it. And so I think the best way isn't just rattling off statistics. It is truly showing people our heart and what we do and giving them a behind the scenes look of agriculture in a way that's transparent and authentic.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the other misconceptions that you've encountered in your work?
And the animal welfare piece, that we are, abusing our animals. And it's really hard to overcome the part that we eat our animals, that we harvest our cows. For people that their relationship with animals is their dogs and their cats that are beloved members of their family, or, what they see on Disney movies, or, they went to the zoo and they see the cute animals there. It is very hard to say, I love my cows, but at the end of the day, we put them in the freezer. So that's a tough bridge to cross. But I go back to talking about the circle of life and how at the end of the day, producers don't just care about the land and the animals, but we really care about helping humanity, and we value people. And so my beef animal can utilize cellulosic material that would be inedible by anything else and can convert it into this nutrient dense beef and 100 plus byproducts to enrich human life. And at the end of the day, I love people and I want to help people. And I think beef and all of those byproducts are a way to help people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. And I think that, kind of back to that Temple Grandin one bad day in their life kind of a thing too, they had a great life and now they're and even that bad day had one bad moment that was, quick and painless. And, some of those things, I don't know if we get into those topics or not, but I think that there are, there have been strides made in the industry where we're trying to make sure that those animals are content and comfortable throughout their entire life cycle. So I think it's something that we can talk about.
And I've battled the animal rights activists for 15 years. They have done an amazing job of appealing to people's emotions and getting those donations. And I have a friend who worked undercover for ASPCA, and he's told me that even if every single person quit donating tomorrow, after they see those dog and cats commercials and $19.99 a month, and you can save these cute crying critters, but he said that they could continue to operate for 30 years without a single additional donation. And why this is really dangerous is because they don't want to improve animal welfare. They want to eliminate animal ownership and shift the dynamic where a dog and a cat and a cow would have the same rights as a citizen. And so we are really sliding into territory where we would not be able to own livestock and we would not be able to raise cattle. And so I would urge people to pay close attention to what these activists are doing. Great examples, Oregon and Colorado have, the PAWS Act and IP13, which is now IP3, I believe. But both of those would essentially make criminals and felons out of everyday cattlemen and women, basically by outlawing and making it illegal to practice everyday, regular, animal stewardship things that we've done for generations.
Is that the place of organizations like Cattlemen's and Farm Bureau to push back against those? I mean, is that really one of the best uses of those organizations, or are there other avenues that you are a fan of, or what do you think about how do we push back against that?
Yeah, I think it's important for members of the organizations to really push those policies and drive that emphasis forward within whatever ag organization they're a part of. Because at the end of the day, sending one person as a lobbyist to Washington, D.C. does not get the job done. What gets the job done is everyday people like you and I, picking up the phone, writing the letters, being engaged, being active and paying attention, and then reaching our neighbors in our own communities, because they're the ones that are going to go vote on those ballot initiatives. And when they see on the ballot, oh, this HSUS driven initiative promises to make a cow's life better. Oh, of course I'll vote for that because I love animals, without understanding, the unintended consequences. I really like Protect the Harvest. They talk about specifically animal rights activists day in and day out. So if you're looking specifically for that topic area, they're a great resource to know and to have a pulse of what's going on in the countryside with the animal rights groups.
Are there events or opportunities for, getting animal rights activists an opportunity to see that? Have you seen that successful anywhere? Giving them an opportunity to see agriculture, the day in and day out of agriculture in action, or is that just not something that has been tried or successful that you're aware of?
You mean like a place where activists get together with producers, or a place to learn more, or what?
Yeah, a place where activists could come and see agriculture in action. Oh. Have you seen that happen, or? No, because I think, if you're an animal rights activist, you already have a very specific skew, a mindset. So it's very hard. I've done countless interviews over the years, speaking with activists, trying to, tell our side of the story. And it's always a major risk, because they're writing articles, they're putting things out, and they're going to write about you exactly how they see you, not based on what you say. And in fact, I had a really scary situation. In 2019, I had written an open letter to Ellen DeGeneres after she had created this YouTube video that said, be neat and eat less meat. And I had written this very kind letter saying, I'd love to come on your show, and I'd love to talk to you about animal welfare and the environment and human health as it relates to beef. The letter went viral, which was amazing. I ended up doing about 40 media interviews after that letter went viral. Never got on Ellen, obviously, but the activist group found me about day 3 of when that letter had gone viral, and they attacked me by the thousands. I was getting comments, and where it got really scary was they were posting on family pictures of my kids, death threats, things like that. I got a phone call to talk to an activist and was very happy to answer their questions. Specifically, they wanted to talk to me about ag gag laws and, undercover videos and plants or drone footage. After I had that phone call, we had a drone flying over our ranch. Couldn't identify where it came from, called all the neighbors. Nobody had a drone. So there's things like that that get a little scary at times. And the reason I tell this story isn't to tell people not to go out and share your story, but just to understand, if you start gaining traction and you're doing the right thing and you're telling the right message, you're going to attract some of these crazies. And so, having the block button is okay. Don't feed the trolls. Don't engage with them. Just ignore them and know it'll pass. And they're boosting you in the algorithm of social media. So it's fine. And just focus on the 95% of people that just genuinely want to learn more about where their food comes from. And, and then call in for support and backup, because we're all a big family in agriculture, and we can help lift each other up and, keep each other strong, because it is a mental battle to go out every day and talk about agriculture, knowing you're going to invite some of those comments. Yeah. And you bring up a good point there about it's the majority of people that are just looking for safe and affordable and, quality taste food. So how have you engaged with the majority of people? What are some of the ways that you are engaging with them, and some of the again, back to the misconceptions, some of the things that you're trying to dispel in your work of engaging with the majority of people who are just looking for safe and flavorful food?
Yeah. I think just showing up and showing, on social media, talking about what you're doing, showing pictures of the calves. A really big hit for our family that's kind of started during COVID, when everyone was stuck at home and cooking at home, was, holy cow, there's all these families that are used to eating on the run, and now they're trying to cook at home and they don't know what to cook. And so, hey, here's an awesome opportunity to talk about beef cuts and how to cook those cuts, kid-friendly recipes, beef nutrition, and all of that kind of sounds so basic and cheesy. But at the end of the day, people go into the grocery store, they're totally intimidated by like, how do I cook a chuck roast? I have no idea. Do you throw it on the grill? What do you do with it? And so trying to help people overcome some of those misconceptions has been really, really popular for us. And then the nutrition piece. I know you asked for misconceptions, but for about 40 years now, since the dietary guidelines for Americans came out, we have been told that animal fats and proteins are bad for you and they're killing us off. And now we're starting to see a tide where people are figuring out, no, I feel better when I have steak for supper and eggs for breakfast and a glass of milk or some heavy whipping cream in my coffee. I feel better and I'm healthier. And unfortunately, though, our nation has never been more sick, and diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and all of those things that come with it. And so I find it interesting because, of course, our meat consumption hasn't gone up the same way as our sugars and carbohydrates consumption has gone up in this country. And so I'm trying to flip that narrative too. So I had the opportunity to work with the South Dakota Beef Industry Council, and that's how the book Beef Strong was born, because it talks about sports nutrition and health and how beef fits into a healthy lifestyle. Challenges in the beef industry right now, and I could rattle off 1,000 things I'm worried about. I am optimistic as well.
Yeah, and I think that the way that those two pieces fit together, the direct to consumer market and the retaining ownership market, it's a people business. This is a people business that we're in. And so if we're going to retain ownership, it's still going to be a people business. You're going to deal with people, but I think it's probably less a people business than the direct to consumer market.
Yeah.
So are you want to be more in the sales side of things, or do you want to be more in the producer side of things? If you want to be more in the producer side of things, retain ownership. If you want to be more in the sales side of things, then sell direct to the consumer. And there's more bang for your buck there. I think there's more of a return for the direct to consumer sales. One thing that's been said to me, one of the light bulb moments I had was just recently. I was talking to Steve Strassheim about his most profitable acre, and he's a vegetable gardener in Iowa and direct marketing his vegetables to people. And he said, if you're going to be in the direct marketing game, you've got to love the selling more than you love the gardening or the farming or the ranching.
Yeah.
And that was a huge light bulb moment to me. Like, that's really what it takes to do it at a high level. And so if you're not going to love the selling more than you love the ranching, then maybe the direct to consumer marketing isn't for you. But I still think you're leaving a huge cut of that pie on the table by not retaining ownership, because if you're producing for yield and grade, you're passing that profit on to somebody else.
Yeah. And, I think most of us, if you asked a cattleman or woman what they like to do, they like being around their cows outside in their pasture without a person in sight. That's me too. But unfortunately, we have an agenda out there of people who are working in concert together to strip producers off the land, to take meat and dairy and eggs off the dinner table. And at the end of the day, consumers are going to vote with their dollars. And so we have to convince them that we're worth sticking around for, because we have folks like Bill Gates that are buying large chunks of American landscape. And by the way, he's a huge investor in plant-based proteins. And he's saying rich nations are going to need to go to synthetic meat in order to save the planet. So he's created the problem, which is the cow and the rancher. He's bought up the solution, and he has the solution, which is his product. And if we don't think that that's like a real thing, I could go in depth on this, but we have the World Economic Forum pushing that we're going to eat crickets and
like it.
And kelp. Yeah, like all these other things. It's like, we laugh and think that sounds like a bad sci-fi movie, but there's people that are dead serious about taking ranchers and making us extinct. And so whether we like it or not, we can be replaced. And so that consumer outreach piece, even if you're not selling your beef in your community, just being a friendly face in your community, having that cowboy hat on and going into town and maybe doing community service projects or being involved so people can just put a face to agriculture, that makes a huge difference in how people perceive who we are in rural America.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned earlier on that you've got a book coming out. Is it Labor Day or Memorial Day?
Memorial Day.
Memorial
so
Day.
Very
so,
soon.
Yeah, coming right up. So this will probably coincide pretty closely, actually, with the release of that book. So can you tell me a little bit about the book? And then definitely we want to talk about how people can get it.
Yeah. So the book will be titled Faith, Family, Freedom. And it's a book highlighting these core values and trying to teach those values to our nation's youth. All my books are illustrated by Michelle Weber. She's a rancher from Lake Benton, Minnesota, super talented, and she can bring almost anything to life. But I've seen some sneak peeks from the studio in this book, and I mean, they'll bring you to tears. They're just gorgeous images of families, of harvesters, combines with flags, while they're out in the cornfield, of churches, of livestock, of our military men and women and our servicemen and women. It's just a beautiful book, and it's definitely a passion project. And instead of working with a third-party client to sponsor the book, this book is entirely funded by the American people. So we have ranches and businesses and families who have stepped up to help us offset the production costs and to bring this book to life. And so I'm very excited about this book and to share it with folks. They can get that book on Amazon, at amandaradke.com or webercustompainting.com.
Actually, in the providence of God, this episode is scheduled to release on Memorial Day.
Well, isn't that something? Well, happy Memorial Day, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful summer. And of course, I want to thank our troops who keep us free and keep us safe and protect all of our freedoms and liberties here in the United States.
Yeah.
Every day I'm thankful for farmers for feeding us and the troops for keeping us safe.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, South Dakota Soil Health Coalition partnered with you on the soil quilt. Could you talk a little bit about that book?
Yeah, this was like a dream project for me. I'm as much as I love cattle and people probably think of me as like a beef girl, I truly love the land and have a passion for preserving native grasslands and keeping that grass on the range, and of course, keeping cattle on the range as well. But the soil quilt uses the metaphor of a blanket or a quilt. So this little boy from the big city goes to visit his grandma's farm in South Dakota, and he's got this cute quilt and this old farmhouse on this bed that he sleeps in. But outside, grandma also teaches him about how the soil is the blanket for our earth and how producers take care of this blanket by doing different things. And so we learn through this book the 5 principles of soil health, which are soil cover, limited disturbance, living roots, diversity, and my favorite, integrating livestock. And so it's kind of a high concepts for kids, but we tried to bring it back to elementary level just to start talking about the basics of what producers do to take care of our natural resources.
How has been the reception of the books, and have you seen them accomplish kind of what you hoped they would accomplish as far as getting into some of those urban settings and having impacts out there?
Yeah, it's been incredible to see the reach. Unfortunately, with COVID, I wasn't able to go to schools for 2 years. So finally, in March, I was able to go to schools. I read the books to over 1,500 kids in just that 1 month. And so I really felt I was getting somewhere again. But yeah, I think it sparks conversations. And what I love about the children's books is it's not just reaching one generation, it's reaching multiples, because we have teachers reading the books, we have grandparents and parents reading the books. And so it's my hope that they too are learning something about agriculture along the way. And I've been really grateful for the support of Farm Bureau and in local bookstores and individual cattlemen's groups who have bought these books in bulk as well and have distributed them, to schools across the country, because it is my goal to have those books in libraries and in schools so that even if we can't be doing visits, those books stay there as a resource for these kids.
I've been part of South Dakota Farm Bureau and even part of South Dakota Farm Bureau leadership for quite a few years now. And I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm legitimately asking,
okay.
How does that relationship happen when your book is selected as book of the year? Do they buy a number of copies? Is it through you, or do they just go out to Amazon and buy them, or how does that relationship happen?
Nope, they've always reached out to me. And in fact, Levi's Lost Calf came out in 2011, and it was a Farm Bureau Book of the Year then, too. So Farm Bureau has always been really supportive. I think almost all of my books, I'd have to check on the last couple, but I think all of the books are listed on the American Farm Bureau Federation's, book or resources. So folks, if they're looking for egg accurate books. They can learn about everything from honeybees to growing peaches and everything in between. The Farm Bureau has all of that stuff. So that's really great. But yeah, they just reached out, and what an honor it is to be featured and included, because it really is my goal to be accurate and show the true story of who we are. And so to be recognized by them is just icing on the cake.
Yeah. Well, we've got listeners in all 50 states, so I'm sure there's people out there in leadership positions, whether it's county farm bureaus or whatever ag organizations they're part of. So hopefully they'll head over to the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/243. And there'll be links to all of Amanda's books as well as to her website. You can get a hold of her there and reach out to her about getting those books into classrooms near you.
Yeah. And I will say they can save money at amandaradke.com. The 6-book set, it'll be 7 books when this airs. So the 7-book set is at a discounted price. But then if folks want to buy in bulk, all they need to do is shoot me a message or an email. And I have a bulk wholesale price too, to help. A lot of groups will reach out and want to donate one to every school in the state, kind of thing. And so happy to help accommodate there and save some money.
Sure. Yeah. Well, hopefully that nets some results. I think they're great books. I'm a huge fan of the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition. What they're doing is, got a conversation coming up with them about their grazing exchange and getting cattle integrated onto crop ground and some of those things. So to have them pick your book or partner with you on the book is I think a huge endorsement, and I'm really glad that they were willing to take that step.
Yeah, well, it was an honor. And honestly, that's my favorite part about talking about conservation and soil management is seeing how those cattle fit into so many pieces of the puzzle. So my favorite thing in the fall is seeing cattle grazing cover crops. And there's nothing better than a cow with a big old turnip in its mouth out on a cornfield. And then they're naturally fertilizing that field. They're eating that, extra feed stuffs while nutrients are, being deposited. And it's just a really cool thing to see. And so, and of course, cattle protect the range and wildlife habitat, because when we keep that soil covered and we have grasses growing, we reduce erosion. Those cows aerate the soil with their hooves. They fertilize it with their manure. They make sure that habitat remains intact for the fox and the deer and the rabbits and the bees. There's so many cool things that cow provides for this planet. And so the climate change stuff it's like I said, it's a beast, but fortunately, we have a lot of really cool stories to tell to counter that stuff.
Any other major misconceptions or anything that we missed that you really were hoping to cover today?
I've probably about heard it all over the years. Everything from antibiotic use to growth hormones to dehorning and castration and shipping. Folks have a lot of misconceptions about who we are in the cattle business. And yeah, I think maybe the biggest misconception out there is that producers think that we can't counter that narrative and we can't move the needle in a positive direction. But I absolutely know that we can. But what we need is for every producer to get involved and to add that to, their list of things that they do in a day, because whether we like it or not, the public's perception of who we are determines whether we get to continue to operate in future generations.
Sure. Yeah. Very, very good. Appreciate that final word. Amanda, thanks for your time today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Very good stuff there with Amanda. Really appreciate her time and taking the time to join me today and talk about those things. I've been talking about it for a couple of weeks in the opening of the show. I'll throw it in here again at the end. I've got some custom engraved cribbage boards. There will be a picture up in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/242, of those custom engraved cribbage boards that will be getting made in the next couple of weeks, and try to get them out somewhere around Father's Day. Can't guarantee they'll get there early, but if you are if you've been a Patreon supporter at $20 per month or more, you will be getting those. And if you sign up in the next couple of weeks before we start getting them made, at the $216 per year, which is just a 10% discount for paying once per year at the $20 per month level, you will be getting one of those in the mail as well, on top of all of the back catalog of bonus content, admission to the private texting group, the private Facebook group, all those things that we've got going on at the lower tiers. You'll also be getting the quarterly gifts sent out as well automatically from Patreon. Right now there is the Fertility Drives the Bus mug, the Working Cows Podcast logo mug, the WCP sticker, and the Working Cows Podcast logo sticker that go out once a quarter to all Patreon supporters. And then on top of that, I try to do a little bit larger gift occasionally. And this custom engraved WCP cribbage board is that larger gift. So next week on the Working Cows Podcast, really looking forward to talking with Dr. Will Winter. And you maybe recognize that name. He's a guy who has written on the Stockman Grass Farmer multiple times. He's done a lot of his own traveling, consulting. And we're going to talk to him about all natural approaches to cattle health. And he's got the chops to talk about it. And kind of an interesting little behind the scenes or side note is that this next episode with Will Winter is one that's going to be very much an advocate for grass-based and grass-fed cattle and grass-based ranching and those kinds of things. And then the next one will be an episode that I did with the guy who runs the Chapel Feedlot in Chapel, Nebraska. And they are people who've been ultrasound testing cattle and sorting them based on those ultrasounds for readiness, finished readiness, and some of those things in the feedlot for 35 years. So kind of just the juxtaposition of the industry and people who are doing out-of-the-box things all around the industry. And this is me kind of saying, here are two different ways of doing it, both people doing it at a high level, doing it successfully. I am not here to be a moral arbiter calling balls and strikes on who's right and who's wrong. I just want to give you something to think about as you run your own operation. So look forward to that. Looking forward to episode 250. I got kind of a cool idea that was planted in my brain by a guest of the Working Cows Podcast, and we're going to see if we can't pull it together. Episode 250 is still a little over a month away, Lord willing, but kind of excited about what we've got in mind there. Really appreciate all the support over the years. If you want to support the podcast,
head over to the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/243.
And there will be a link there in the show notes page to support the podcast, as well as order Amanda's books and all those things. So thank you guys so much, and look forward to another episode of the Working Cows Podcast coming your way real soon.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.